As a health professional, you've probably noticed that one size diet doesn't fit all of your clients. Some might do really well, while others have a horrendous time or won't come back, which is a big problem. You know, it's 30% success rate and the other 70% fade or don't come back is not very satisfactory. And that's what we've noticed with most of our health practitioners who rely on one diet and believe in one diet, that they lose out in a very big chunk. And there is a big problem with diet and with the solidarity to clinics. When you love a doctor because they gave you a diet that works, I love Gerson, I love ketogenic, I love because it helped me, you are happy to share that with the world. But what about if that is towards the practitioner? You know, you don't want those another failure and move on to the next practitioner. And I found that makes the biggest difference of all once I adjust my program to my clients. Which brings us to functional medicine for health professionals, how to treat cancer patients, individuals, instead of treating a disease. Now, diet is probably one of the most challenging subjects of all. And we've noticed that. It's not only us, it's pretty much every clinic we visited. You know, I was there 7 years or 8 years ago and they were all vegetarian. And then they switched over to a ketogenic diet. Then they tried this, then they tried that. And yes, it's all for practical reasons. We want to feed all our patients the same food. Otherwise, it gets really complicated. But most of the time, it doesn't work. And what we discovered in Switzerland at the Paracelsus Clinic, which really started to enlighten my way of thinking, they look at the patient, discover all the symptoms, look at what their systems are like, and that's what we will discuss in this video, and then adjust the diet. So one client got the red sticker for their lunch buffet, the other one got the green and the blue, and depending on which colors were labeled at the food, that's what they could choose. It was always not what you wanted. You wanted always the other colors. But this is saving you a lot of time by focusing on the client instead of focusing on a diet and trying to match the diet to that patient. So let's go through and we'll cover probably the most obvious things first. Processed food, junk food, organic, non-organic, preserved, flavored, colored foods are not beneficial. And they're not a healing diet. They are an avoidance diet. You avoid getting sick in the first place. So it's very important that your client doesn't continue that kind of food because it just doesn't help with their recovery. You can also agree that pro-inflammatory food are like fuel on fire. If I eat sugar and I have inflammation, boom, it's really flaring up. If I eat wheat, if I eat soy, all those pro-inflammatory foods, they drive inflammation. And we know inflammation causes more cancer cells, causes a lot of exhaustion, is really debilitating, causes acidity. So we need to reduce that, which means all of those pro-inflammatory foods need to go too. But that's pretty much it. After that, it's not quite as clear-cut. Now, let's just go back to what we've put together in our program. And really, it's so simple. You go through the symptoms, which you have your client tick in the questionnaire. As they go through the questionnaire, they go through all the different symptoms. And if there is fat in stool, what would that mean? Well, the liver probably doesn't produce enough bile salts. If the liver doesn't produce enough bile, then you probably have an inflamed gallbladder, which then causes inflammation and no absorption of those healthy fats for your system, especially the brain, who needs that. Or you might have pancreatic problems where the pancreas doesn't produce enough lipase and then doesn't break down the fats. So balancing, finding out which is the weaker system, what we discussed in our last video, really finding out where the systemic weaknesses are, organ weaknesses are, and then understanding how they correlate with those symptoms and with the disease is pretty obvious. But then you can correlate that to the diet. And that's You know, having someone who has fat digestive problems on a ketogenic diet or putting them by recommendation on a GAPS diet to heal their gut doesn't really work. Adverse reactions. And when you look at GAPS diet, it produces massive amounts of histamines. Histamines are washed out when you cook the bones. So if you give them that and they have liver congestion, liver problems, can't produce enough bile salts, they also usually have a flare-up of an allergic reaction. So with your well-meant, really beautiful diet that may help 30%, the other 70% might get terribly sick. Or let's say the other 30% has no results and the others get sick. So we need to adjust based on diet. And in the same way, a friend of mine went to the Gerson clinic and had his carrot and apple juice and green juices, you know, and after 3 days, he was bloated like a balloon. He had severe diabetic problems. His metabolic syndrome just couldn't handle that huge amount of sugar spikes all the time with those juices. So he got sick and had to break. Now, when he came back, it was not the Gerson diet that was bad. It was he was a failure. And that's how often we see things, but it was actually just the wrong diet for him. So for some other people, it might work. And that's why I always say, treat the patient and not the disease. And don't sell remedies or fixed illusions that this should be good for everyone. Suggesting a raw food diet to a client with high permeability and inflammation would also not be good. It aggravates, and they usually don't have the fire, the digestive fire, because of the inflammation to break down the foods. There's many different angles. We can look at the stress factor. A patient who has high levels of stress has high levels of cortisol. Cortisol doesn't allow them to sleep very well, which leads to adrenal fatigue. So as soon as their adrenals go down, they need more protein to repair the adrenal function. So putting them onto a vegan diet with very low protein wouldn't work either. It would actually make their situation worse. And I'm not talking about vegans, you know, it's a very intense diet, but if you have an MTRR or MTR impairment, polymorphism, a SNP in your DNA, well, then you have methylation problems, and that means B12 deficiencies. If B12 deficiencies are active, many body functions don't work, and we've seen that. It was not me, it was Dr. Rao who said it very nice. He said, Marcus, I have so many vegans that come and they're sicker because they're so deficient, their bodies can't work. So a diet is something really beautiful as a healing diet, especially those extreme diets like GAPS, like ketogenic diet. But they're not like long-term diets if you don't have the right metabolism, if you don't have the right DNA, or if it's not meant for you. Put someone from Alaska or from the Eskimos, put them onto a raw vegetarian diet, they die. And put me onto a whale flubber diet, I will die. We need to adjust it to the body type. And this is where one man's poison becomes another person's remedy. So let's look at this little graph. I really like it because it gives me a little bit of an overview what we look at. And I won't go through all the details, but just to show you that when you give your client a recommendation, don't just go through and based on beliefs, look at what their situation is. The perfect diet for a person who has liver and gallbladder problems would be lower fat content or increase their lipase production and their bile salt production support the liver. Overall health, if a person is really weak, really tired, exhausted, has low energy, they also have low digestive energy. So giving them raw food will just bloat and make them sick. They need cooked food, warm food, pre-digested food so that the absorption rate is increased. Hormones and adrenals, they need more protein. On the other side, if we have kidney disease, they need less protein. If we have pancreatic problems, and always associated also to stress and liver, they thrive on sugar. So reducing the sugar load, really, really important. You know, liver needs more bitter herbs and bitter substances for it to detoxify and to work. It's always based on what your systemic health is that we need to support. Gastrointestinal, Crohn's disease, IBS, raw food, high fiber, usually totally adverse. They need more cooked food, warm food, low fiber food, so that the digestion is not as aggravated with that high inflammation. Stress in itself can cause leaky gut, can cause so many problems, so we always need to look at that as an individual factor and reduce that, because otherwise everything else is aggravated, inflammation aggravated. Food sensitivities and allergies, you can't prescribe a diet, like if somebody is on a dairy sensitivity or even allergy, and we have that Ayurvedic principle and we just prescribe them dairy and milk, they can get so horribly sick of food that you react allergic to. Whether your gut is repaired or not will never work. You need to stay away. All nuts and seeds in salads, things like that. Exercise, if somebody's really outdoor, working hard, sweating, and they need more carbs than someone else might need. Dysbiosis in the gut, leaky gut, you realize it always depends. We need to adjust our dietary program to the personality, to their organ strength and organ weakness. And therefore, once you get that, you have a diet that makes a person feel well. Now, one aspect that I would like to address here is it's a detective work. It's not just straightforward selling one idea and then hoping it works. It's more adjusted. And we found working with clients on that basis, the only thing they are really involved in their health, well, to a great deal, is their diet. What do they eat? How do they observe? So looking at dietary reglementation is really helpful to them. Leaky gut is pretty much prevalent in all patients who had toxicity, infections, medications, chemo, antibiotics. That's the causes. So we can pretty much say 90% of all people who have chronic degenerative diseases have that problem. And that's why I used it in video 1 as a hook. If you hook them in the right way, they have the greatest benefit without, alkalining the body, reducing acidity, oxygenating the system, and reducing the pro-inflammatory foods. Well, they will feel in very, very short time a lot better. And then you look at their food sensitivities, which is a secondary effect. Now, a lot of people asked me, and there were a few comments underneath, Marcus, do we do a food exclusion diet? Well, it doesn't really work while you have leaky gut. If I have leaky gut and I eat eggs and they squeeze through, that's undigested proteins, that's really red alert for your immune system. That's a breeding ground for cancer. That's really the worst. So you would have an allergic reaction. Once your gut is healed, you might tolerate eggs really well. So we found that people who go onto a food exclusion diet who still have leaky gut before they do it, they respond to pretty much everything. And that's why it's not as accurate as if you heal the gut first. And we talked about that in video number 1. If you start healing the gut, you create a massive transformation for the client, and then use the exclusion diet to see sensitivities, make them aware what lifts their energy, what drains their energy. Once I feel every time I eat a certain food, I go like, whoom, and I have no more energy, well then leave that away. Let the body tell you what it makes, why it feels good or not. So those things really help. See, I told you already in the first video that I had Achilles tendonitis really bad, and I did everything. I had laser treatment, PMF treatment, I had needling, band-aids, everything. I dibbled around like an old fuddy-duddy. I didn't know what else to do until someone said, why don't you stop all grain and all wheat, grain and all dairy, and really do it diligent and heal the gut. Take your own pills, do the ozone. And I did the ozone, but I didn't do the grain-free. So 2 weeks, everything was gone. See, our body has triggers. And I always say treatments don't really help as long as we don't remove the trigger. And this is one of those examples which we've observed now 100 times. Patients who stop the trigger, stop what really kicks their disease into gear, or we remove it for them, like with our next subject that we discuss next time, supplementation deficiencies, you can have a massive transformation in no time. All of a sudden, systems start working. And that's why it is so important that we don't just look at the treatment, but look at what drives the disease in the first place. Now, this is a chart I had just had to put in. One of our programs that we do when we look at gastrointestinal health is we look at the stool. Well, first of all, you look at your poo in the toilet. How does it look? Does it float? Does it sink? Does it swim? Does it stink? Like all those things, which is important because you can read a lot out of it. But we also look at a stool test. And this one was done by Dr. Maria Emilia Gadhera Serra, a beautiful ozone doctor from Cuba. And she actually covered a subject with that, which a lot of people ask. Marcus, if I use ozone, do I kill the good bacteria too? And I think that's why we need to look at it. Here we had a lot of levels out of balance and elevated or not enough. And then after 3 months of rectal insufflations, all of them balanced. And I think this is one of these examples where we need to come away from treating disease, killing off bacteria, promoting good bacteria, feeding the body with probiotics. Like we have that tendency to fix very literal what's broken, and yet we don't achieve any results. So what we try to do here is different. We change the milieu of the body. We change our body environment. And think of it like a garden, a veggie garden. Now, if you put into that's just the other way around. If we put into a veggie garden bacteria and their environment is perfect, anaerobic, toxic, not enough oxygen, that means anaerobic, acidic, lots of cofactors, they thrive. It's like fertilized ground for them. And that's why one patient has a tick bite, has no problem. One person flies and has no cancer cells, and the other one who has the same outside conditions gets a full outbreak of stage 4 cancer or Lyme disease. It's the environment of the body that makes it or breaks it. So what we try to change is the environment. Now, when you think about rectal insufflation, the amount of ozone that you inject is minimal. For a huge colon, just 700, 500 milliliter, 200 milliliter is minimal. You don't kill off all bacteria. You only allow the body to handle the situation, which is inducing the energy, which release with that singlet O, and the rest of the oxygen, which is the 2O that remain, you feed your system, you oxygenate and repair your gut. See, ozone has a trigger function. It's an oxidative treatment. So it oxidizes unhealthy cells, which become a vaccine to your healthy cells. It stimulates your healthy cells to produce enzymes and protect itself. It triggers an NIF2 switch, like we talked about, which then drives a whole healing response, a healing reaction, and it supplies that huge amount of oxygen for your body to heal. You just need to keep that fart a bit in. Like when you have a rectal insufflation, just try to sit on it, hold it, so that the oxygen can be absorbed. One of the main triggers of leaky gut is lack of oxygen. Anaerobic bacteria, they don't need oxygen. They grow in an area where there is lack of oxygen. So now you supply oxygen and those anaerobic bacteria all of a sudden reduce. They have no reason to be there. And your healthy bacteria, which need oxygen, they thrive. So go away from that literal thinking more into systemic thinking. We treat the patient, not the disease. And that's what functional medicine is all about. Truly healed functional medicine is what I always say. We start with the symptoms, we look at the effects, we look at the disease, we look at the systemic health, And then from there, we look at all the different treatments that help to remove the root cause of disease, the original root cause of disease. And all of a sudden, the body heals. Like Charlotte Gerson says, once the body heals, it heals. You cannot heal selectively. And you realize that once you have success with the gut, the skin clears up, the mind clears up, the whole constitution, energy levels go up. It's like a chain reaction, and sometimes it moves in very mysterious ways. Your eyesight gets better, then your feet, your joints become more smooth. It's like a whole avalanche of transformation, which makes your clients feel great, binds them to you, brings them back, brings them word of mouth, and you feel good about yourself. I found that a very important factor, because I was, like everybody else, prescribing, this is good, try this. And when you then get the feedback, well, it didn't work, it made me feel really bad. Actually, your recommendation almost killed me. It doesn't feel very good at all. Okay, so let's go to the preview of what we try to do next time. Well, pretty obvious. We looked at digestive health today, uptake of nutrients, and really building up the stamina and health of the body, and reducing all the side effects from allergies, reactions, leaky gut, and all of that. And that leads us to deficiencies. We take up nutrients through our food or through supplements. Now, why are we deficient? Is it only because we don't eat the right foods, or does our body use up excessive amounts of certain minerals and vitamins because we're sick? Well, there is a huge advantage of understanding why your body uses up certain minerals and vitamins and phytonutrients and amino acids to repair. So replenishing those, supporting your body in its attempt to repair, will give you also incredible results. And that's what we discuss next time when we talk about deficiencies. Okay? So if you're intrigued, if you're interested to join our professional team, find the link. It's underneath the video or in the video, and fill out the form. It's a few short questions that see whether we are a fit. Not everybody will fit our program, but if, then I will get back to you right away. And otherwise, leave a comment on YouTube or underneath this video and share your experience. I'm really looking forward to read them all.